So to ink my edges, I'm using a brown color. I happen to be using this Distress Oxide Walnut Stain. But any brown ink that you have is going to work for this purpose. Or you could even use other colors, but I like the look of brown on this particular project. Just putting some dark ink along that edge so you can see up close here. Hopefully it'll show up. Where I've got the brown ink here and none down here. So it does change up the look. It kind of finishes off that edge. Hides any white end to the paper. And if your paper does not, you know, if there's a little bit of the board showing, this is going to help hide that. Where on the bottom here, you can see a little bit of the board sticking below my paper because I did not get that lined up exactly. So this is going to help to just kind of camouflage that and not make it so noticeable. Now you can see on there, right? It just kind of hides that white paper edge there, and I think gives it a finished, more of a finished look. And I am getting some brown ink on the top here. That's part of my purpose, is a little on the top, right on the corner. And if you want the brown to come in a little bit farther, you can even put your board down and just do some sponging right along the top surface. My suggestion would be, if you do this, is to do a light coat. And then when you want it darker, do another light coat on top and just build it up slowly. That gives you some control over it and you don't end up with one dark splotch. So I'll do a little bit more along the edges. I don't want to go in too far for this particular project, but I'll add a little along the edge. And sometimes I like to have the corners go in a little bit deeper, just so that the corners look slightly more distressed. And you'll notice that I do take my applicator and I tend to go in circles. That'll give you a more even look than if you were to just take it up and down like this. You'd end up with a nice neat row. And I want it so it's kind of feathered and blended in. So doing little circles helps to achieve that look. Okay, so I think I've got what I want there. You could actually use that same technique if you wanted your whole paper or even areas of it to be darker. Just go in anywhere on your paper and make it look a little bit more aged. So that's one way to alter any of your chipboards, is to just cover it with some patterned paper. Then I'll show you how I did some of these other chipboards. I'll put it on the white area here and maybe you can see that shows up better. So some of these were just done with paint. Others were done with some embossing powder. So I think it would be fun to show you both of those methods. And of course, depending on the color of embossing powder that you're using, and my hands, I don't like to put my hands to the camera because they're covered in ink, but depending on the embossing powder, now this is a sand colored embossing powder, and this one is more of a green. I don't remember the name of the color, but it's one of the mixed media ones that's got more of a green and blue shades in there. So you can get some very different looks. And then also with your painting, here's one where I've put a couple different colors of paint on it. So to me that gives it a look like it's kind of metal and maybe a little rust growing on there. Or you know how rust makes kind of pits in the metal. Look at this one. This, oh, to me this just does look like a old rusty gear that you found out in the farmer's field that's just been sitting there in the water and rusting for a long time. Love that look. So the first thing I'll show you with another way to alter your chipboard is to paint it. So I'm going to take this nice chain link chipboard from Southern Ridge, nice Canadian brand, and I'll actually just chop a piece off of it here. It's that easy to cut it with scissors. It really just cuts through there almost like paper. And then I'm just going to paint this to show how easy that is to alter. You can take a regular paintbrush. I just happened to pull out my, what do you call this? Stipple brush, I think. You could even use your fingers. It's just a matter of moving the paint onto your chipboard. So whatever kind of an applicator you have, it's going to work. So that easy just to change it up. And now we've got it. This is gray called Elephant that I used compared to the chipboard that's unpainted. You can always add it to your projects, just this natural chipboard color too. Depending on your project, sometimes that is the perfect color for it. Then you can also, you could add more colors of paint on top of it, like I've done with some of these others. You can also put embossing powder on there. So, and you can put embossing powder on top of the paint even. So here's some sand dollars that I wanted to emboss, like this one, to make it look kind of a sand color as compared to plain. These are actually wood. They're also from Southern Ridge, but these are little wood sand dollars instead of the chipboard, so they're quite thick. And they take the treatment with paint or embossing just as chipboard would. So I've chosen this embossing powder, which is from Stampendous, and it's called Golden Sand. Sounds perfect to give a sand look, right? So if you've done embossing on cardstock or papers, you treat your chipboard exactly the same way. If you have not done embossing before, this is how easy it is. First, I need a medium that will help my powder, because this embossing powder is just a fine powder. I need that to stay on my project long enough to heat set it without it blowing away from the heat gun. So I'm going to use this Emboss It dauber. Now if you have pigment pads or an ink pad that is called Versamark, same idea. Got the same type of medium inside of it. It's just in a different form. It's in a pad instead of this little dauber bottle. But these daubers are really handy when you're doing miscellaneous shapes or things that are not necessarily flat. So it's just got this little dauber top on there. I'm pushing down, and then it gives a look on here. It's clear, but kind of wet looking, or you might see it like a little bit of a shine. And that just makes it so it's like a very wet ink, or a slow drying ink, I guess you could say. And then I'm going to sprinkle powder on there. Take off the excess, and then capture the remaining of that powder back into my jar. And then now what I have is the powder is just sitting on there. So it's not going to go anywhere, it's just stuck on there. But now we're going to heat set it. So I have a heat gun here, and I'm just going to let it warm up a little bit. And it does get quite warm, so if I need to hold this still, I'm just going to hold it with the tip of my scissors rather than my finger. And then hopefully you can even see that melting. And as soon as that's melted, you're done. So I'm going to let that cool off just a minute because it can get rather warm with the heat gun there, but it doesn't take too long. So you can see that on there. It's got this nice shiny look to it. And it kind of looks like sand. So we'll zoom back out again so you can see the project. What else can I show you? Okay, so here's one that's been painted, But if I want to give it a shine look like this, so depending what you want to do with it, you can leave it so it's just the paint look. This is a matte finish on your paint, and this has a high gloss finish on it. So I achieved this high gloss look by putting some embossing powder on top of the paint. So again, I'm going to go in with my dauber right on top of this painted piece of I was going to say chalkboard. It's chipboard. And put this medium all over it. And then I'm going to take this is clear embossing powder, and just cover it. So I'm just going to, I've got it in a big enough dish, I can just dip it right in there. Shake off any excess. And now it looks kind of dull and powdery, but we're going to heat set that. And possibly zoom in so you can watch that getting heat set as well. There we go. And I really hope you get to see this melt, because as many years as I've been heat embossing, I never stop being fascinated by watching this change to a nice glossy finish. And you can see that getting all shiny and glossy there now. Love it. Doesn't take very long when your gun has already heated up. So let that sit there for just a minute and cool off. And now you can see how glossy that is compared to one that's just been painted. This is only paint, and there's got our clear embossing powder on there. So that's a way that you can change it up as well. Now, if you wanted to add another embossing powder on top of there, you certainly could do that. We could make it look like there's a little bit of sand on top of this. So, hey, let's just try it. I need my sand again. So now again, I need to use my dauber, and wherever I put the dauber, we're going to have this other embossing powder is going to stick. So I'll just put some along the bottom here. Small area, doesn't need much. Sprinkle my powder on there. Shake off my excess. And then I'm going to recapture all that extra back in the jar. So now you see where we've got some of that sand just on the lower portion. And then I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. And let it cool for just a minute. So if you don't let it cool and you happen to pick it up while the embossing powder is still hot and melty, it'll actually stick to your finger. So even when you pick up your finger, it's stuck there and it keeps burning. Ask me how I know. I might be missing a fingerprint because I'm not always patient. But there we go. So that's a neat look too. You can do multiple layers, multiple colors. So really fun to alter your chipboard in a huge variety of ways. This is just a couple of ways that it can be done. And if you'd like to see what I'm going to do with this project, hang around and I'll add some on there or put some of this together. So what I've done, this tag you saw me making. Whoops, I need to bring this out so you can see the whole thing. This is the tag that you saw me covering with paper and inking the edges. I did the same thing with this tag that's a little bit smaller, and I plan to layer them for this particular project. So I'll end up gluing those down. This one I covered with paper and sanded and inked the edges just like I did on the one where you were watching. Here is that chain chipboard. So similar to what you saw me painting, but this one's covered in embossing. Some green and some gold. So a couple of different colors there. You can see that better. So up here, we've got the whole thing, not gold, it's kind of a copper. And then I put in some green here just to alter that. This ship's wheel was painted with multiple colors of paint. So we've got some rust color, some browns, a little bit of kind of that green patina look. And then I also embossed just a couple of sections just because it's fun and I like that altered look. And then what I plan on doing with that is taking, this is a seahorse that I cut out of the same scrapbook paper from Stamperia, or from the same line. And I'm going to glue that on there. And then I'm going to take some of these corals, add a nice pop of color someplace. I feel like corals should be growing out the bottom of it. Bottom of my project somewhere. Can even intertwine it with some of the rope I've got going on there just for some added texture. I've got some of these crabs. All of these chipboard pieces that I have altered, they're all from Southern Ridge. The only ones that aren't are these base tags, which are a Tim Holtz tags. And then I can just start, you know, maybe this little crab over here is caught in the fishnet. And even this fishnet we have at Scrap and Bean. I like doing that on a lot of my beachy projects. It comes in a package like this. You get lots of fishnet, and I just cut out pieces of it as I'm going to use it. And since I want this to all look like it's kind of things at the bottom of the sea, maybe there is some gears, just like on this seahorse, where he's very steampunk and full of gears. I want to have some of that sticking out. And these multicolored ones that kind of could go as well. We can have some in the background. And because he's kind of floating, possibly the lower portion of the sea, we can have a little bit of sea life clinging to him too. And can't forget our little sand dollars. Got to have those in there someplace. Maybe some shells. Anyways, you get the idea. So there's an idea for a project showing how you can use multiple ways of altering your chipboard and even put them together into one project. Thanks for watching.